and welcome to another interesting episode of the Reflection series, where we get to hear stories that recharge and rejuvenate us. And like always, we have a very interesting speaker today, Jude Pemell. Welcome, Jude. Jude Pemell is a Sydney-based forensic psychotherapist, writer, and filmmaker. She has been practicing Raj Yoga meditation since 1984. And Jude travels internationally to conduct seminars and workshops and has written books as well. So she's an author too. So we are very happy to have you with us. And the topic of the story is the Improbables. And this is about how two very unlikely people in a very unlikely place changed a very predictable story. So sounds very interesting, and we would like to hear what the story is and what happened. So without any further delay, I would like to welcome you again, Jude, and it's over to you.
Thank you, Lata. Well, this story happened quite a few years ago when I was working in the criminal justice system for many years, and I was working at a metropolitan prison in the Greater Sydney area. And I was running groups on this particular occasion for people with drug and alcohol issues. And these groups ran for 10 years and were really quite delightful from my point of view. Anyway, an inmate came along, a fellow came along to the group one night, and he said it had been recommended that he attend. And he explained that he had an alcohol problem. And as our sessions, he came every week, and as the sessions sort of unfolded, I'm going to call this person Joe, obviously not his real name. And Joe would say he loved coming to the groups, but in his sharing, he would say he just didn't feel that he could ever stop drinking. And because it was sort of all he really knew, and committing crime was the only means he had to make a living. Anyway, he continued to come. He was a very lovely guy and very, very sweet. And one night we had another new person come into the group, and he was a person who was well educated. He had committed he was convicted of committing a white collar crime. I won't go into any details, but he said, look, it had been recommended that he come, although he does not have any substance abuse issues. And I said, well, you're very welcome. If you can take benefit from the group, you're very welcome to come. So he did a session, and he said he enjoyed the session. He felt he'd learned a lot, and he said he would like to come back. So he came back. And so now I had Joe and this new fellow, who I'll call Steve, in the group, along with quite a few other people. And so one night, Joe was sharing about his drinking, and after he'd shared, Joe said to him, son, I'm really, really concerned about your drinking. How terrible for you to feel that there's no way you can stop. He said, I just feel really worried about you. And over time, people came to the group I mean, long term, they came for years, well, whatever their sentence was. Once they came to the group, they tended to stay because they got something out of it. And so they continued to come, and Steve would often say to Joe, I'm so concerned about your drinking. And he would call Joe son. And he would have been in probably his mid-50s. And Joe was considerably younger. And Joe spoke to me one night after the group, and he said, Steve is such a nice person, Jude. He said he comes up to me quite often out in the yard or, in the mess, and he'll put his hand on my shoulder and he'll say, I'm so worried about your drinking. And he said, no one's ever said that to me before. And he said, actually, Jude, no one's ever cared before. And he said, I know you cared, but he said, this is all new for me. And he would often comment in the group that he loved coming, but he couldn't get it. He said, I've been coming here for all these months and I still don't get it. It's not going in. And he finished his sentence. He wasn't allowed to do works release because he had a history of drinking when he did works release, so he wasn't allowed to go. So he was released. He finished his sentence and he was released. And meanwhile, Steve, who the first night he came, he'd only just come to the prison that day or the day before, he said, I'll be out of here in a couple of days because I shouldn't be here and my lawyer will be getting me out very quickly. Well, the months went by and he would say there were more charges. He hadn't even been invited to go to court. He was just, in his absence, found guilty and another 6 months or a year or two added to his sentence. And he became quite down about this, but he kept coming to the group. And it came Christmas. And I was outside the jail. I was actually in Paddington. And I heard this voice shouting out, hey, Jude, it's Joe. And I sort of looked around and there he was, parked. And he jumped out of the car and he came up and he was so pleased to see me. And he said, hey, Jude, so great to see you. Merry Christmas. He said, hey, would you like a couple of bottles of wine? And I said, oh, no, thank you. I said, I don't drink, Joe, but also I can't receive stolen property. And so we had a bit of a giggle and caught up a little bit, and then we both went on our merry way. And then some considerable time later, I was at the prison running the group, and I hear this voice say, hey, Jude, it's great to see you. And it was Joe. He was back. And he said, oh, I'm so looking forward to coming back to your group. And he seemed very happy to be back in prison and back at the group. So Steve was still coming to the group. And so Steve was saying, Joe, all the time you've been out, I've been really concerned about you and worrying whether you were all right because I just feel so worried about you drinking, son. But on this occasion, they both were coming to the group, and after a while, Joe would say, hey, Jude, I'm starting to get this. I've been hearing you say these things for so many, well, it was years. He said, I'm actually starting to get this. And his works release time came up, and he he got his works release. They said, okay, we're going to give you a go. And he got a job, he told me, working for a mechanic. And so he would go off every morning on works release. He'd go to his job at the mechanical place, whatever it was. And he would come back at night sober. First. And this went on. His work release went for about 9 months, I think. And he had an absolutely flawless record of coming home to the jail at night. And he would continue to come to the group. And Steve would say to him, son, I am so proud of you. I'm so proud of you. And Joe said, you know, no one's ever spoken to me like this before. And he said, it really means a lot to me. And I didn't go into his background with him, but I think, you know, Steve provided that father figure for him. And Joe successfully completed his works release. With his job, he told us that the guy he was working for offered him a permanent position when he got out of jail. And so he was released. And he said, Jude, I don't think I'm going to see you again. He said, I've got it this time. I understand everything you're telling me. And he said, I don't think I'll be back. And he didn't come back. I was there for years after that. He did not come back. And so that's my story.
That's so amazing too.
Yes.
It's like when we see someone changing, you know, someone who hasn't been able to for a very long time due to whatever addiction or but then when they really change, it's like the inner glow. And the beauty of it is when someone has seen a potential that they can change as well and not lose hope and keep giving them encouragement and love and care. It's such a beautiful thing that we have shared.
It is. And, you know, it's like when you pick up a stray animal and give them some love and caring and attention, it's like putting a flower that's drooping into a vase of water and watching it stand up straight, you know. Human beings are so responsive to just a bit of care. And isn't it interesting that it all happened in jail? You know, just the right person came into the jail at the right time for him, and a father figure who cared about him and really verbalized that and expressed it. And he knew, he said, I know he means it.
Yeah. And listening to the story, I was just thinking that you know, when we think about prison, it's like, you know, something a little extreme for many of them. But then if such a person can change, then definitely all of us have something in us which needs a bit of change in a way. No, we can all become a little more good, a little more kinder, a little more better person than what we are. It just needs that hope and encouragement, and you know, get a little up there and do that.
And sometimes it's the right person at the right time, you know, it's that synchronicity. But, you know, a very heartwarming story. And both of those men were so adorable. Lovely guys.
And Jude, if I could ask you one question,
Mm,
that when we say, when we talk about change,
mm,
it's also about how we think.
mm.
There has to be a thought inside that, yes, I want to do something differently, or I want to change, I want to, move in the right direction now, or something like that.
It takes a lot more than a thought. I don't know anyone who wants to be an addict. I've worked with thousands of them. I never met one who wanted to be an addict. So it takes much more than a thought. It's about energy. It's all about energy. For me, that's the key. The thought can be there, but there's got to be more. The heart's got to be. The heart has to be touched and has to experience something.
And do you think it may not be possible always that there's that one person who is there to help you out? In such situations or circumstances, how can someone, start towards that change, or what should they do if they really want to change, but there isn't a person who can support them that time?
I think that is very, very challenging. But I have seen that, and because I worked in forensic settings for such a long time, and I worked with a lot of addiction, a lot of substance dependency, and in and out of those criminal justice settings. And I was working in a women's detox. This is a few decades ago too. And I remember a woman coming into the detox, and she was with a particular counsellor who did not give her any encouragement. And he used to say things to her like, you're never going to make it. You're wasting your time. You're never going to make it. And would be really negative towards her. And it just fired that woman's determination to recover. And she did. She did. And I think it was, and, I would identify personally that I am also like that. If somebody tells me I can't do something, I just have to go and prove them wrong. So it's, there's a bit of a counter situation happening with some people, I think.
Yeah.
And, if your heart, I think, I can have the thought, but if my heart is really, really engaged, if my heart is saying, I'm going to do this, then I will do it against all odds. And I think I was very blessed to spend so much time working in a place where miracles occur. Places like prisons, like drug and alcohol settings, detoxes, rehabs. These are places, even just AA meetings and so on, these are the places where you will see miracles occurring.
That's
every day.
And, the few words that you mentioned, care, and having concern, and you mentioned fatherly figure, it's also, showing love and kindness.
It is.
So these are like some core virtues or values that really touches the heart. And when that happens, that is when the flower blooms, as you said. That's so beautiful.
And it was, in Joe's case, it was coming from someone who was the right age to be his dad, and who was that very sort of nurturing type of a a man, and a father figure, and possibly the first real father figure he had ever had. And there's something very potent in that, I've noticed, for men in particular, who may never have really had a dad around. It's very, very potent.
Yeah.
Mm.
Thank you, Jude. We had a really wonderful story. And as you have been meditating for such a long time, for decades now, it would be wonderful if you can lead our viewers into some meditation experience by a commentary, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lata. I breathe deeply into the inner core of my being. And I allow the breath to fill my awareness as it moves deeper. And I let go of everything outside myself. My awareness moves within. To that safe, very protected place. Deep in my consciousness. Where I begin to touch the stillness, the silence of the soul. Into the blissful self. The timelessness and spaciousness. That lies within. And I feel such peace. Away from the thoughts, the interference, in the environment. The love. Begins to emanate inside. I feel the loving presence the love flows like a river. I become part of this river of love. Flowing silently. From the depths of my being. This is the feeling that I have longed for. This beautiful connection with the gentlest, sensation of being. Light, easy, timeless being. The light within grows and grows. Filling the world. Shanti.
Thank you, Jude, for the beautiful meditation experience. And thank you once again for joining us today and sharing this beautiful story.
Oh, it's my
It really
pleasure.
appreciate-
Thank you, Lata.
And for our viewers, if you would like to know more about us, please do visit our website, www.brahmakumaris.org.au. There are various programs and events listed, and you could also visit any of the local meditation centers. So the addresses are provided in there as well. So thank you once again for joining us, and we will see you again with another interesting episode and another interesting story. Till then, take care. Om Shanti.